Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is Burning Questions. The topic that set the internet on fire this week is what is going on in Germany in terms of Ukraine, and why are they so hesitant in being hawkish on Russia? Today with me, I have Andreas Umland, who is going to help us answer these questions.
Yeah, my name is Andreas Umland. I'm an analyst at the Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies at the Swedish Institute of International Affairs and Associate Professor of Political Science at the Kiev Mohyla Academy.
That's awesome. Well, very nice to meet you. I think it's our first time speaking, at least on this channel. And today we're going to be talking about Germany and German politics and sort of why we're seeing so much hesitation from Olaf Scholz in giving Ukraine tourists and in kind of, not hesitation in countering Russia, but hesitation in countering Russia decisively and effectively. And also, there is obviously an upcoming German election, and there is one frontrunner that everyone expects to win. His last name is Merz, and there are some very mixed opinions of him everywhere that I've been trying to look at it. So what is your opinion on Scholz and on his politics and on what we can sort of expect until that election?
The hesitation in Scholz's policies towards Ukraine and Russia has a lot to do with the tradition of the Social Democratic Party, where there is a mythology around what is called the New Eastern Policy of the early 1970s, when West Germany then had a Social Democratic chancellor like Scholz's too, Willy Brandt, who had a conciliatory approach to Moscow, to then the Soviet Union. And there's a mythology in the Social Democratic Party that allegedly this New Eastern Policy of Willy Brandt in the early 1970s contributed to perestroika, to the end of the Cold War, and to the new political thinking of Gorbachev, which I think is a myth. These things were determined by other developments inside the Soviet Union and internationally, and had little to do actually with this social democratic foreign policy then. The second determinant for Scholz's hesitant, ambivalent approach towards Ukraine is German public opinion, which unfortunately is very hesitant, and where many people in Germany think that delivery of the cruise missiles Taurus to Ukraine would drag Germany into this war, and Germany could be attacked and bombed by Russia. So this is the fear that many have. There's still a lingering pro-Russian and lingering anti-Ukrainian aspect to that too. But I think this pro-Russian and anti-Ukrainian aspect is a minor factor nowadays in Germany. I think the main determinant for this hesitant approach of Germany and the phone call that Scholz recently made to Putin and many other such signs is this fear of an escalation of the Russian-Ukrainian war, a fear of a nuclear war, a fear of World War III, which is more prevalent in Germany than in other European countries, and which then produces this strange policy that Germany is conducting towards Eastern Europe. It's neither ignoring Ukraine interests, nor is it fully cooperating as Ukraine wishes this with Kiev. So that is the situation that we have now with Merz as the possible, and I would even say new probable chancellor in spring next year. This may change because Merz has a different biography. He represents a different party with a different identity and different history. How far the German approach will change is still to be seen, because the public opinion will, of course, not change that much. So Merz will find himself in a somewhat similar situation as Scholz. Whether he can reshape German public opinion and then also German foreign policy is still an open question.
Do you think that a lot of sort of the public opinion in Germany that you mentioned stems from the fact that there are a lot of Russians living in Germany, and there is even a term called Russlanddeutsche, and there is a huge history with the Soviet Union, obviously, with the occupation and with the fall of the Berlin Wall. Does that have anything to do with how sort of the public perception is shaped?
Certainly, the special relationship that Germany once had with the Soviet Union and with the also Tsarist Empire plays a role. The large Russian diaspora in Germany also plays a certain role, although it is a divided diaspora. It's not necessarily a pro-Putin and anti-Ukrainian diaspora. It's a very sort of divergent diaspora consisting of different political attitudes and people with different attitudes and with different biographies, and also from different waves of emigration from the Tsarist Empire, the Soviet Union, and post-Soviet Russia. So this is all there, but I would say in the last 2.5 years since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, this fear factor has become the most important one. And that has more to do with the specifics of German political and, in general, German culture and psychology. So you may know, for instance, that one of the English translations of the German word Angst, which means fear, is in English simply Angst. Yeah? And the fact that English speakers have taken over this German word to speak of a particularly panicking fear and to name it Angst with the German word Angst in a way illustrates this, I would say, pathology of German national psychology.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think Germany also has this kind of. It's interesting. We talked about it with someone just the other day, and not someone who's an expert in Germany, but because there obviously in World War II there was a, let's call it, a situation between Germany and Russia, where Germany kind of waltzed into Russia, and I think there is also the guilt that remained there, because at some point Scholz said that there won't be German missiles falling into Russian territory. But to me, it's very interesting because the majority of the damage that was suffered from the Nazis in World War II in Soviet Union was actually on the territory of Ukraine, both from the German army and from the Red Army, because neither one of these armies was very good to us. And arguably, a lot of people actually were saying that the Red Army was a lot more cruel than the Nazis were, particularly in Ukraine, not to take away from anyone's struggles. So it's interesting to me that there is this sentiment shared with, oh, we don't want to do this to Russia because we have already done enough to them. Meanwhile, actually, the majority of the damage was caused to Ukraine during the Nazi Germany reign in Eastern Europe.
Yes, I think this misunderstanding was a major issue until 2022. Since then, one has to say this situation has somewhat improved. So many Germans now know that if they have historical responsibility, it's above all a historical responsibility to Ukraine, and only in the second instance to Russia. So this is something that I would say is not as bad as it used to be. It's still there. It's still also co-determining German attitudes towards Russia. But I think this topic of German, let's say, cruise missiles hitting Russia, legitimate Russian state territory, has more to do with German fears of retaliation from Russia. So there's also this historical aspect, and there are Germans who think that this should not happen because we attacked Russia already once. But I think the major factor is simply fear that this would then trigger World War III. Although I think this fear is unjustified, because what Russia is seeking in Ukraine is a victory. And if NATO becomes involved directly in this war, there's no victory for Russia. I think that is something that people in in Moscow actually understand that if they have so many problems with achieving victory of Ukraine, there's certainly no victory if NATO becomes involved. So there's no rational reason to fear that escalation, but it's very prominent nevertheless in Germany.
Well, but that's exactly why Russian trolls and Russian propaganda spread this narrative of nuclear war and nuclear escalation in World War III, like direct World War III. Because I think politically we're in World War III. So to me, this is kind of where we're at, and that's just my humble opinion. But I think Russia spreads this narrative of like actual battlefield World War III because they want the Western nations and Western people to be scared of escalation, because Russia knows that they will lose if Western nations join into the fight. So what makes Merz and his views different? Because it seems like he's not scared of escalation. It seems like he is, the good old, like, I'm going to make everything. He's like, he's posing as a strongman, right? So is there any merit to it, or is it just talk? Because as I've said before we started recording, I've spoken to quite a few German people, which, doesn't represent the majority of the population, because obviously I can't know a decent amount of Germans to get an idea. But from the Germans I do know from different areas of Germany, it's a 50-50. Some people say he is the great new hope of Germany, and some people say that he is just all talk and no steam.
Friedrich Merz, as the head of the Christian Democratic Union, the party that is probably going to have the best result in the upcoming parliamentary elections on the 23rd of February 2025, and both other representatives of his party have made more hawkish statements on Russia than representatives of the Social Democratic Party. There are also some hawks within the Social Democratic Party, so that is in a way good and makes me also more hopeful that a government that will be led by Merz will behave differently from Scholz's government. However, the problem is that German public opinion is very hesitant, and so the task here of Merz and of other politicians will be to actually reshape this public opinion. And the other tricky moment here is that currently the most likely coalition partner of the Christian Democratic Union is the same Social Democratic Party that is now also in government and is leading the current government. And it's then going to be the junior partner of the Christian Democratic Union. And so that party then will also again have an influence also on foreign policy, may even get the foreign ministry. And then the question will also be which politicians from the Social Democratic Party will actually represent it in the new government. So will it be more the hawkish part of the Social Democrats, or will it be rather people like Scholz and the more dovish types? And then they will also, bring this hesitation into the new government of Germany.
So with Scholz, pardon, I'm going to take an opportunity to not only educate our viewers but also myself. What happens to Scholz once his party loses? Does he stay in the government in some capacity, or does he just retire or seek a different involvement?
The question of Scholz's future is an open one because he could, as the leader of the Social Democrats, certainly again enter the government in some role, probably as a minister, perhaps as vice chancellor. But whether he will do so is an open question, because he has been then already chancellor. He's currently chancellor, and he has already been also a minister in another CDU-SPD coalition of the Christian Democrats with the Social Democrats, where he was finance minister. So it is something that Scholz has done before, but it's difficult for me to imagine that he will again become a minister after he has been already chancellor. So the most likely future for him will be actually either retirement or some role in the parliament. but again, it's very difficult to say what he will decide to do then. Currently, it looks unlikely that the Social Democrats will have more votes than the Christian Democrats, and so the only role they can have in a future German government, if the current opinion polls stay the way they are at the moment, is as a junior partner, and then I cannot really imagine that Scholz is going to be just an ordinary minister in a future German government.
I see. Interesting. So it looks like he is either going to be upgrading somewhere or just retiring and seeking a different, I guess, hobby in life or interest in life. There are a couple of people that are in Germany that have a very sort of hawkish politics on Ukraine, and I would say, a lot of people talk about them as women have more balls than men do, and that would be Annalena Baerbock and Strack-Zimmermann. Why do you think it is that their approach to Ukraine is so different than that of men who have been in politics probably much longer than they have, at least when talking about Baerbock?
Yes, I would also actually see that a certain tendency that German female politicians are more hawkish on Russia and more supportive of Ukraine. One could add also to the ones you have mentioned, Annalena Baerbock and Strack-Zimmermann, the current and future president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
Yeah.
She's also a former German politician within Germany and representative of the Christian Democratic Union, and also some others. So maybe that has to do with the simple fact that perhaps there's more empathy from these female politicians for the weaker side in this war,
Yeah.
and a different approach to international affairs in general. That would be my suspicion, but I don't know of any systematic research on that. One would also have to, I suppose that there is actually some, or there will be some on this particular topic. I also see something like that, a tendency like that in other countries, let's say in the United States, where, let's say, Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, for instance, have a hawkish approach towards Russia. So maybe that has indeed something to do with gender here, and I would not exclude that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there are a lot of theories floating online if we talk about Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton versus, male politicians in America, but we're not talking about America, and we could go in a lot of conspiracy theories. But yeah, I did notice a pattern that particularly in Germany, also in a lot of Baltic countries, the most vocal people that are the most hawkish on Russia and are the least afraid of any sort of policy of escalation and have the most outwardly anti-Russian verbal exclamations are always women, and it's very interesting to see how we're being taken as the weak gender, and yet in this forefront of the political World War III, it's women who are leading the game. So it's very interesting. I myself was very surprised by Annalena Baerbock, and I think a lot of people were too, because she's quite young for a politician, and when she came into office, I think a lot of people were not expecting a lot out of her, and she kind of demonstrated herself to be a very, very a respect-worthy person who has a lot of really good ideas and isn't scared of standing up for them. Well, I mean, do you have any of your own sort of observations that you wanted to share about kind of Germany and the moods in Germany right now, and I don't know, what's the info space like, maybe what's going on with propaganda at this time, because, Russia is kind of pushing on everything at the moment, and which indicates to me that they're kind of running out of, of a lot of resources, but at the same time, it's not great, because I think we're in this stage where we either push them and they have to give up, or they push us and we have to give up, and they hope that they push us, Western countries drop us, and we have to give up.
I think what is missing in Germany and also in other countries is a discussion of the global international implications of this war. I think what is now being more and more understood in Germany is that this war has implications for Germany. For instance, what is now has now become in recent months a major topic in Germany is the possibility of new refugee waves from Ukraine in case of a Russian victory in Ukraine. That
Yeah.
there may be more millions of Ukrainians simply fleeing Ukraine and then arriving in Germany, and how we would then deal with that. So that is something that fortunately has now become better understood. I think that is also one of the drivers of German support for Ukraine now. What is less understood is the grave repercussions of Russia's behavior for the international security system, for the UN system, the UN Security Council, and especially the nuclear non-proliferation regime and NPT, the new nuclear non-proliferation treaty, because the most scandalous, I would say, aspect of this war is that everybody in this war, Russia, Ukraine, and all third parties, they behaving the way they do behave because Russia has nuclear weapons and Ukraine does not have nuclear weapons. And oddly, Russia's possession of nuclear weapons is legitimized and supported and protected by the non-proliferation treaty, and Ukraine's non-possession of nuclear weapons is also supported and legitimized and imposed by the non-proliferation treaty. And that puts the whole logic of the regime for the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons on its head. And that could have very grave repercussions for the future of non-proliferation, because many countries may then decide if Russia comes out with some sort of gain from this war, that it's actually better to have nuclear weapons or other weapons of mass destruction, because you cannot rely on international law, international solidarity, and international organizations anymore. So that is something that is not sufficiently understood yet in many Western countries.
Well, yeah, exactly. And there were quite a few Western generals that came out and said recently that if Russia didn't have nuclear weapons, then we would have already been in the fight. And it's like, you don't say this in public. You don't say this to maintain the world's balance. Like, everybody understands this, but you do not come out and say this. As like former, NATO general, you just don't do that. It's terrifying because it's the kind of thing that makes, countries that are considering nuclear proliferation to be like, oh, so if I have nukes, I can do whatever I want. So it's not great. But then, speaking of nuclear weapons, there has been news coming out of Russia that they have built hundreds of mobile nuclear shelters. I don't know if you have seen that.
I have not yet seen that, but this is something that has been discussed already for the last 3 years, that perhaps the Russian leadership will hide in a nuclear shelter. But I don't think that this is also so relevant, because, as I said, I think these wars, the Second Chechen War, the Russian-Georgian War, the intervention in Syria, the annexation of Crimea, and now the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, they are done under the assumption that at the end of this war will be victory. And so it has a domestic political dimension. It's not sort of an apocalyptic final war against some sort of evil. These Russian politicians, they are mostly cynics rather than fanatics. They want to gain something from this, and they don't want to destroy the world, because they have a lot to lose as well. They are all billionaires, and they live a very nice life, and I guess they don't want to spend the rest of their lives in nuclear bomb shelters.
No, of course. I mean, no, those are also not like the type of nuclear bomb shelters where, they would be housing Russian politicians. These are just mobile nuclear shelters for tactical nuclear weapon fallout. And so that's interesting because Putin recently changed the doctrine into allowing the use of tactical nukes in Ukraine, But there has also been this threat yesterday, actually, of Russia. There was intelligence that Russia is going to be targeting Western embassies in Ukraine, which is something that I don't necessarily believe completely or understand, because the territory of the German embassy is the territory of Germany, so that's like attacking Germany. The territory of the American embassy is the territory of the United States, so it's like attacking the United States, and Russia is not stupid enough to do that. But then, with the news coming out at the same time about the tactical nuclear shelters and all of these things, the assumption was that maybe they don't care and they just know that, they're ready for like the retaliation, or to see the retaliation or something. And I wonder what your idea. I'm not saying that I believe that this is true. I'm just, I'm kind of like I'm wrapping together in a nice pretty bow what's been happening on the internet.
I think Russia wants to limit this war to remain a Russo-Ukrainian war, perhaps with support for itself from other countries like North Korea and Iran and China and so on. But it does not want this war to become a war where Ukraine is directly supported by other countries. It does not want to become a larger war, because then this victory will be more difficult to achieve. And so I cannot imagine that there will be a direct attack on Western countries. I also cannot imagine, for that reason, even the use of tactical nuclear weapons, because Russia can do that in Ukraine, but the use of a nuclear weapon would change the nature of this war. It would force basically every country of the world to reposition itself towards this war, because that would be a breach of a regime that has been in place now for many decades. We would be in a new era. And then even countries like China may actually reconsider their stance towards this war. And there have been signals from China that they don't want the use of nuclear weapons. I don't think that is a sort of a humanitarian interest. It's simply an interest in a non-use of nuclear weapons for national reasons for China. China does not want that, let's say, the countries surrounding China become nuclear as a result of a use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine, that other countries would then basically leave the non-proliferation regime or try to get other weapons of mass destruction. So I don't think this is all so much really happening. And well, they're maybe preparing themselves for nuclear war, but I don't think these cynics will actually go nuclear, because then an actual victory in Ukraine would become much more difficult.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that there is a lot of speculation kind of happening online, because also there hasn't been anything bread and circus worthy in a while in this sort of in the war. And I feel like a lot of the people that are following it, of course, like, anytime that something big and massive and dramatic happens, more people are interested. So I think that people are trying to look into like things that don't necessarily exist, like, Russia trying to target embassies to see how far the West would go. I mean, I think that Russia was definitely deterred from trying to do anything and attacking Kyiv last night, at least because F-16s in Poland were ordered to go up in the air and take down anything on approach to Kyiv, because, that's a threat to embassies, and embassies were evacuated. So I don't think Russia would have even dared. And if Russia wanted to start something with the West and see how far they would go, last night would be the night, because, again, Polish F-16s were in the air. Well, I really do appreciate all of your insight on Germany and kind of like German politics towards Ukraine and, the feelings of German people. I think my last question is kind of, do you think, we did say special relationship, right? But do you think the German public has a special relationship with Russia itself? Like a sort of this, this kind of like air of the mysterious Russian soul and people that, have been wronged by Germany and stuff like that?
I think that was a major factor for many decades after World War II, both for the West German government and then for, especially, of course, for the East German government, as far as one can regard it as an independent actor, and then also for the government of United Germany.
Yeah.
I think since 2022, this factor, this sort of sympathetic interest, let's call it that way, for Russia has decreased, because the facts and the pictures simply from Ukraine have been so cruel that this mystified Russian soul has become less attractive, let's put it at least that way, for most Germans. Not for every German, especially in East Germany. I come from East Germany. There's still this lingering sympathy for Russia and even for Putin, and this narrative that allegedly the West and the United States have actually triggered this war. But in the whole of Germany, I think this factor has significantly decreased, and Russia has been sort of demystified and is now looking much less attractive than it used to be until 2022.
Oh, that's actually very good to hear, because I feel like there has been a lot of, at least in the beginning, there was a lot of guilt and there was a lot of sort of around the world especially, and I was wondering how that is going to impact Germany and how that impacts Germany, because for instance, if you go to France, there is still this obsession and fascination with like Russian writers and Russian poets, of which Russia actually had very few, because the rest of them are kind of like appropriated from other countries. So I wondered if that feeling lingered in Germany, and it's very good to know that it's not necessarily as lingering as like in other places in Europe. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today, and I really appreciate all of your answers and this dialogue, and I found out a lot for myself today, so I really hope that our viewers are going to find out a lot for themselves as well, especially if they don't, they don't know a lot about Germany. And of course, I hope to see you here again in the future.
I hope so too. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Andreas. Well, we normally aim to put internet fires out. And I think this might be the first episode where it was incredibly smooth and we did not cause any fires or set any fires. I do really hope that this conversation explained German politics and the German idea of Ukraine and Russia and everything that's going on better to you. If you enjoyed this conversation and you would like to hear many more like this, with me talking to some brilliant experts worldwide, please don't forget to follow this channel and also, of course, turn on notifications. Like this video and send it to a friend, because you never know who might be interested in these conversations as well. And if you would so wish, because I would so wish that you wish, please do leave a comment underneath this video and tell me what you think. Maybe ask me questions or give me your suggestions. I always read them and I try to take them to heart, and I try to keep them in mind for next episodes. See you next time.